live show on deck. Heads up, everybody. Ready, camera one, pick up Judge Whopper's entrance. Ready, camera two. Okay, take your places. Quiet in the studio. Action.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another session of Codex Court. In today's case, Judge Whopper will be hearing testimony from the plaintiffs, the management of the Codex LAN and WAN group, who have filed a class action suit against the defendants, the Codex sales force, and the Modulation Products Management, alleging that the Codex sales force sells only modems, and modems. The plaintiffs... Attention, please. The plaintiffs argue that they do not receive enough attention from the Codex sales force for their product line. The defendants will argue that in 1985 they apportioned their sales time realistically, considering the status of the plaintiff's product line. Now Judge Whopper is entering the court, so let's join the action in the courtroom. Please rise.
Please be seated, which I see you already are. Would the plaintiff please identify himself?
P.U.
One more remark like that, sir, and I'll hold you in contempt of court. Now identify yourself.
Pugh, Your Honor. My name is Pugh.
Oh, I see. And what is your first name, Mr. Pugh?
Lanny. My name is Lanny Pugh.
And what is your occupation, Mr. Pugh?
I am a vice president, Your Honor.
Vice president of what, Mr. Pugh?
Vice President, IBU.
And just what exactly does a vice president, IBU, do, Mr. Pugh?
It's sort of a head riveter, Your Honor. You know, a bolt replacer.
And what does IBU stand for?
Well, Your Honor, literally it stands for Independent Business Unit. But in actuality, IBU should stand for I've been unsupported.
Unsupported by whom, Mr. Pugh?
By the Codex sales force, Your Honor. All I ever hear is I could sell lands, but, which is why I'm here, Your Honor.
Sir, you are the co-plaintiff in this class action suit. Would you please identify yourself?
Sudan.
I'll get to who you want to sue at the proper time. Right now, I don't know if it's Dan you want to sue, or George or Mary, or anybody else. All I want you to do is to identify yourself to the court.
Sudan, Your Honor. My name is Sudan.
I see. And what is your first name, Mr. Sudan?
When, Your Honor. My name is Wan Sudan.
And what exactly is the complaint of Mr. Lanny Pugh and Mr. Wan Sudan?
We don't get enough selling time from the Codex sales force, Your Honor. All they want to do is sell modems.
Sir, you are one of the defendants in this case. Would you please identify yourself?
Blenner, Your Honor.
And your first name is what, Mr. Blenner?
Joel, Your Honor. But most people call me Waring. I got that nickname, Your Honor, because at parties I'm such a great mixer. You know, a Waring Blenner.
And sir, I assume you are the co-defendant. Would you please identify yourself?
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Lockett. And what is your first name?
John, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Lockett. Let the record show that the co-defendant's name is Mr. John Lockett. And what is your occupation, Mr. Lockett?
I am a vice president, Your Honor.
Vice president of what, Mr. Lockett?
Your Honor, I'm vice president of Modems.
And just exactly how is a vice president of Modems measured, Mr. Lockett?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, Your Honor. The mo of them I sell, the mo money I make.
Mr. Pugh, now that I have this somewhat bizarre case framed, pardon my use of that word, would you please be more specific about the charges against Mr. Waring Blenner and Mr. John Lockett?
Yes, Your Honor. It was so bad last summer that when Wan Sedan and I polled the sales force asking for their WAN and LAN forecasts, they told us to go to hell with WANs and LANs. They were going after more laps. It seems some lunatic in the sales organization concocted some cockamamie sales program called Grand Prix. And he actually paid them some really heavy money, like $500,000, Your Honor, for selling modems. I never heard of anything so ridiculous. It's an accepted fact, Your Honor, that any gorilla can sell modems. And you can bet that Mr. Wan Sedan and I would never stoop to bribing the sales force with money to sell our products.
Mr. Sedan, I'm not sure I know exactly what your job is.
I'm a mux master, Your Honor.
Don't you mean mix master, Mr. Sedan?
No, Your Honor. I'm a mux master. Have been one for years and years.
And what does a mux master do?
I forecast the mux mix, Your Honor. And that's one very tough job, Your Honor. Can you imagine the difficulty of mixing the muxes and muxing the mixes in the mux master business?
But I thought you said you were a mix master, Mr. Sedan.
No, Your Honor. I already told you, I'm not a mix master. I'm a mux master.
Oh, yes, you're quite right. And you forecast the mux mix, don't you?
Yes, Your Honor. I fix mux mixes. I'm a mux mix fixer.
Then how do you do it fixing mux mixes?
Your Honor, I always miss the mux mix forecast fix. That's why I'm a co-plaintiff. I did not get a fair share of the Codex sales for attention in 1985. My mux mix fix picks stinks. Because all the sales people sold in 1985 was modems, modems, and more modems.
Mr. Waring Blenner, what do you have to...
Whoa, who's it? Bullshit. Who's it?
Mr. Blenner, Mr. Blenner, Mr. Blenner. Kindly regain control of yourself and answer the question.
I apologize, Your Honor. Sometimes I overact to being blamed for the maximizing bookings. You see, Your Honor, It's my job to direct the Codex sales force to generate as much business as possible, regardless of market conditions. 1985 was a difficult year in our industry, so we naturally sold the products which were most competitive, and I don't apologize for doing that.
What do you have to say to that, Mr. Lockett?
Well, I agree with what Waring Blenner just said, Your Honor. I'd like to add that I think it's my job to compete for the attention of the sales force to sell my products, just as it's the job of Mr. Lanny Pugh and Mr. Wan Sudan over here to compete for the attention of the sales force. It seems that in 1985, my marketing team just plain outsold other departments in gaining sales force attention. And I have every intention of continuing to compete for that attention in 1986.
What is your outlook for succeeding in that regard in 1986?
Well, it'll be tougher, Your Honor. The plaintiffs have added major new, very competitive products to their product line and have more new products on the way.
Does this worry you, Mr. Lockett?
Not really, Your Honor. The fact is, the more competitive the plaintiffs' products are, and the more of them we sell, the more modems we will sell, because I'll be selling complete networks to new customers. The way I see it, everybody wins, except, of course, our competition. They will be the big losers in 1986.
Mr. Blenner, how do you respond to Mr. Lanny Pugh's complaint about the 1985 Codex Grand Prix virtually shutting down sales activity on his products?
I don't deny he's right about that, Your Honor. But if you were a regional sales director and somebody offered you $20,000 for making the most laps, you'd sell 2600 series modems too, Your Honor. It's just that I'm not the one to blame for the Grand Prix.
Just exactly who is to blame for the Grand Prix, Mr. Blenner?
The bearded racing commissioner, Your Honor.
Does this bearded racing commissioner have a name?
Story, Your Honor.
No, I don't care to hear any story right now, Mr. Blenner. I want you to identify the bearded racing commissioner.
Story, Your Honor. His name is Story.
And what is Story's first name?
Mr., Your Honor. His name is Mr. Story.
And what is Mr. Story's occupation when he's not a racing commissioner?
Buildings and grounds, Your Honor.
This is the most ridiculous case I've ever heard. I thought Codex was in the data communications business, not all this stuff about lands, WANs, and laps. Racing commissioner, ground superintendent, this is lunacy. I'll give you my decision after a brief recess.
Well, this is a very interesting case indeed. The defendants seem to be admitting that the plaintiff's complaints are valid, but they seem to be telling Judge Whopper that they didn't do properly under the circumstances. Even more interesting, the defendants attempted to shift the blame to this mysterious bearded racing commissioner, a certain Mr. Story, for approving a sales program called Grand Prix. Even more bizarre is the fact that this Mr. Story's usual responsibilities are supervising buildings and grounds. We'll return to hear Judge Whopper's findings after a brief message.
Please be seated. Before I give my ruling on this case, let me first explain. This is the most unusual case I've heard. During the recess, I studied the Codex history and annual report. I also studied the Codex product lines in 1985 and compared them to their status today. To my utter amazement, I learned that this mysterious bearded racing commissioner, a certain Mr. Story, is not only in charge of buildings and grounds, he is the president of Codex. As you will hear when I give my ruling, this has a major influence on my decision and my job. I agree with the plaintiff's claim that they did not receive sufficient attention from the Codex sales force in 1985. But I believe they could have done more to earn that attention, just as Mr. Lockett apparently did. Further, it is clear to me that the plaintiffs are accusing the wrong individuals. The bearded racing commissioner, Mr. Story, and not Mr. Blenner, is responsible for the Grand Prix and the success of the 2600 modems. However, it is very clear to me that the plaintiffs have introduced new products which dramatically improves their competitive positioning, and it is clear that Mr. Story's strategy is for Codex to be a complete networking company, not just a modem company. It is imperative that the Codex sales force sell the entire product line in 1986. For these reasons, I find Mr. Blenner and Mr. Lockett not guilty of the charges. But I direct the Codex sales force to use all of Mr. Lockett's, Mr. Pugh's, and Mr. Sedan's products to beat up on the competition in 1986. Court is adjourned.